Ah, bueno, como dijo Jimmy, dado la limitación de mi español, yo voy a hablar en inglés, pero quiero en principio agradecer a todos aquí, especialmente a la Fundación, a Jimmy, a Moby, para esta oportunidad de hablar en esta foro, en mi juicio muy importante. Switching to English, I'm talking about the third Lancet series, which is supporting development in early infancy, from science to policies at scale. And I must say that I'm one of 40 or 50 people who contributed to this series. This is not my work. This is the work of a large collective from many countries all over the world, from many disciplines. All of us came together because we agree about the importance of early infancy. In terms of the overall program for this fora, what I'm trying to do is give a very broad overview of what we know, what we think we know about the importance of early childhood, based on many countries, not based on El Salvador at all. And then subsequently in the program, we'll have the benefit of learning about some particular experiences elsewhere in Latin America and then in El Salvador. So in some sense, we're starting way up here and moving towards programs explicit for El Salvador. Let me just give a brief preview of what I'm talking about. There's probably 4 or 5 key points. The first point is that it's an enormous problem, enormous issue. There's many millions of children at risk of not achieving their potential. In the earlier Lancet series, data on 2004 were presented. At that time, something like 279 million of children under age of 5 were at risk of not achieving their potential. There's been an improvement, a reduction of about 11% between 2004 and 2010. But in 2010, there still were about 250 million children at risk of not achieving their potential. You know, that's a huge number, greater than the population of Brazil and of much of Spanish-speaking Latin America, but only children from 0 to 5. There's increasing evidence of interventions that can improve the development of children. And these interventions can take place over all the life cycle, from interventions on the left for adolescents, for women, to during the time of pregnancy, to the time of giving birth, to the neonatal period, to the first years of life, to early infancy, and to the school ages. And there's listed here, it's a summary of a vast amount of studies that point to different kinds of interventions which have been shown to be successful, at least in some contexts, in low and middle income countries. Next point is there's huge cost of not acting. And in various ways, we've tried to estimate the cost of not acting. Once, in terms of all the empirical data that I talk about today, it's all based on as careful and conservative kind of assumptions that we can make given the information that's currently available. But there are qualifications, but it's the best estimates that we have. And those estimates are getting better over time. So the gross cost of not acting are the possible gains that are lost. For example, if you don't invest enough in a small child, that child is likely to have less schooling, less cognitive development, as an adult, be less productive in the labor force, in the home. There's likely to be intergenerational effects. And all those gains that are lost without the investment are what we call the gross cost of not acting. But it takes resources to invest in children, so there's also the cost of acting, the resources necessary to invest in the children. And by the net cost of not acting, we mean the gross cost minus the resource cost. If those costs are positive, then society is losing that gain by not investing more in children. And as I sort of verbally said, the investments that occur in early childhood have some immediate improvements, but they also have improvements over the life cycle of the child. Over the life cycle of the child. In the school years, in adult years, over the total life. And it's difficult to estimate those, but we have done our best to try to estimate those gains over the life cycle. Here's an example of the cost of not moving a child from being stunted to not being stunted. These are careful estimates, and if they are valid, the costs are enormous. The costs are equivalent to over 4 grades of school, or in terms of lifetime income, over 40% of the income of the child. And there's other costs like that from just being poor or from being poor and stunted. Currently, as I said before, about 250 million children are at risk. That's 43% of the children in the world are in the low and middle income countries. And there are estimates that there's a cost in terms of their earnings, potential earnings as adults, of about 25%. That's a huge amount. Here's some estimates of what I was calling the gross cost of not acting. In this case, focusing upon reducing stunting in a series of 10 countries, which are countries which have a high prevalence of stunting. And the last column gives the cost of not taking activity to eliminate that stunting, which depends firstly on the benefits per child relative to the cost of eliminating stunting, and secondly on the number of children who are stunted. Of course, the gains will be larger if there are more children who would benefit from eliminating stunting. And the last column is quite striking. In terms of gross national product, the gains, the cost of non-eliminating stunting range in these high prevalence countries from 3 to 12.7% of gross national product. That's a huge percentage. In the penultimate column are given the public expenditures on health as a proportion of gross national product for comparison. And you see in all but one of the countries, the cost of not acting to remove stunting is greater, often much greater, than the total public expenditures on health. These are similar calculations for a few countries in Latin America, 2 in Central America, from the cost of not acting in terms of having home visits for children under 3 years of age, or preschool programs for children 3 to 5. And again, as a percentage of product, these are very large percentages, ranging in the 2 Central American countries from 1.4 to 3.6%. So the Lancet series tried to indicate what are ways to implement programs in larger scale. And there are 5 points here that I will talk about one by one. First, effective interventions. One important example is the UNICEF World Health Organization Care for Child Development Program, which currently is being implemented at the time we wrote the article, it's probably more now, 19 countries. And this program, a few examples. Here's a few countries where there's been careful studies of these programs and where they've been found to be quite effective. 3 countries, very populous countries in Asia, in this example. Then the second point is what modalities are effective for reaching families. And one needs some platform that is well designed, which reaches mothers and children. And in most countries, the platform most promising are the various health programs, mother-infant health programs. And so the argument is that that's the easiest and most desirable platform to build upon. And there's evidence of cost-effective interventions in building on that platform. And here are some examples of interventions which in the mother-infant space, which have been shown to have high rates of return in various low and medium income countries. And there's probably no surprises in that list, but that doesn't mean they're not very, very important. But there's also other platforms that are important beyond mother-child health, education, social protection, programs for protection of infants, water and sanitation, and a challenge, as everyone who knows who works in this area, is trying to integrate these programs to work in a coordinated way to improve the situation for infants and young children. In the Lancet series, we summarized a few programs that have been effective at scale, because a big question, of course, is whether programs which seem effective on a small scale could also be expanded very broadly nationally. And here's 4 examples from 3 different continents. I mean, the India program is particularly noteworthy just because of the numbers involved. We're here talking about over 100 million children who participate in the Indian program. The one from Latin America in this set of examples is Chile Crece Contigo, and that's a program which started, I think, 2007, has expanded since, and has a number of strengths. It has sort of feedback mechanisms that seem to work well. It's based on evidence-based laws that were the foundation for this program. There's a strong government commitment. There's strong interdependence of the various sectors that participate in this program. And the program's delivered at a local level, which enables greater adaptation to local conditions. One point important, the penultimate point, is the program is monitored and evaluated, trying to continuously assess what is happening and how it can be improved. And that's a very important point for this program, but I think also for everything I have to say. Everything I have to say relates to various programs which seem to work well in some situations in some low and middle income countries, but if one's thinking these programs for El Salvador, one wants to learn what one can learn from them, but El Salvador is different even than the neighbors in Central America, and it's important to adapt the program to conditions in El Salvador and to monitor and evaluate the program to see if it can be improved over time. And here's just a list of some of these characteristics that are important for programs at grand scale. Perhaps most important is commitment, a political commitment for these programs to be able to devote resources, to be able to coordinate among various sectors, to be able to collect information to assess the programs. But all that takes some societal and political commitment. In addition to programs directed at children, there are other programs at the national level that are likely to be important in terms of supporting child development in regard to the time of the parents. For example, time for breastfeeding, leave, parental leave, time to take care of children who are sick, and in terms of resources of various sorts, including monetary transfers, insurance of health. Minimum wages may be helpful. Free pre-primary education may be important. There's a question of that the Lancet series address is, are there possibilities of introducing or modifying existing programs in a way that's cost effective? And estimates were made for a large number of countries of this possibility through adding to current programs of reproductive, maternal, neonatal, and child health. These two components indicated in the bullet points. First, to promote caring and sensitive care of children through visits of the parents with the parents, and second, to help in situations in which there's maternal depression through a set of 5 sessions. And these simulations suggest that significant impacts could be had at very low cost, a cost of less than $1 per year per child. So, for looking forward, as is the spirit of this forum, one point is the science keeps saying it's important to start early because then you don't have to offset the disadvantages the children have from the lack of early investments. And of course, that's the focus of this forum. It's important to expand the political commitment to the program consistent with the Sustainable Development Goals and create political contexts that are favorable to the program. But beyond the political context, of course, is bringing in the whole, which is one of the strengths of the intentions of this forum, as I understand it, to bring in actively the private sector as well as the public sector. Fourth, to adopt a multi-sectoral focus, which requires coordination, maybe new institutions. Fifth, at least particularly for the youngest children, using the health sector as an entrance point. And then finally, to formalize the systems of implementation, coordination, and as I said before, evaluation, and evaluation is an important part of the process. We just don't know for sure exactly what will work in El Salvador. Based on another country's experience and the El Salvadorian experience, the larger we will do our best, but to know how well it's working, we need to monitor and evaluate. So, sort of in conclusion, this is what the series concluded. There's a real opportunity here to take leadership in improving early childhood throughout the world from the point of view of the Lancet series, and obtain substantial gains in the long run, both at the level of individuals and society. And our future is with the children of El Salvador. So thank you for your attention. I apologize for the awkwardness of my presentation, but hopefully it was intelligible despite this unfortunate incident. Thank you.